Welcome to the Scottish Watches podcast. On this episode, we finalise thing. It's Endgame for Watches and Wonders 2025. The brands we didn't speak about in our previous episode, the ones we saw, the ones we heard about, the ones we got to try on. We're going to talk about Tudor, we're going to talk about Patek, we're going to talk about the most complicated watch we have ever seen from Vacheron Constantin, plus lots of other stuff, including a chance meeting with the folks from Bremont, where a lot of things were talked about. You're going to have to hang around till the end of the episode to find out more about that. Tons and tons, and we're just going to crack on with it. We're not going to ask Dave what he's been up to because we don't really care.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Let's move on with things. We should maybe start the show, do you think, with something that's got smaller instead of bigger?
The economy?
Well, that's absolutely happened, but we should probably not dive too deeply into that and the reasons. That will definitely get us into trouble, and move on with things like Patek Philippe.
We could do. They are one of the Holy Trinity. They're the guys that make things that used to be more oval shaped, perhaps. Now they've gone a little bit hip to be square. They had a song and dance last year, just around about the time me and Dave were heading across to Hong Kong for slightly different reasons, and Cupidus came out of nowhere, and everybody loved to hate it. A little bit like anything where there's a change in direction, or change in shape, or a change in size. Lots of people say negative things without actually getting to go hands-on with it. It's a watch. If you like it, you buy it. We constantly say that. It's up to you. But we like to bring you information so you can make informed decisions. And perhaps the original size, being more square-shaped, was just a little bit too big for some folks.
It was, and I think it is fair to say that most folk immediately jumped on the bandwagon of, oh my God, it's too big. No, we can't be having this. This is ridiculous. Look what it's replacing, inverted commas. This is terrible. We can't be having this. But actually, when you get your hands on it, the original Cupidus turned out to be not quite as bad as folks were saying it was. It was definitely thin. It was a bit weird in the respect of proportionally compared to what was before. It maybe was a little bit different, but I think maybe the memo has got through because they have brought out a smaller Cupidus. That's pretty much all we've got to say about Patek, outside of one other thing, which is they have brought out a Calatrava, very understated, very cool. And I've said for a long time that I think the Calatrava is the real Patek Philippe. That's the one that if you really understand what you're looking at, that is the watch within their range to have. None of the highfalutin, oh my goodness, look, he's got a Nautilus, he's got a this, he's got a that, Let's stick with the Calatrava. That's a very cool, understated, classy dress watch. And I think Patek Philippe are pretty much one of the best in the game when it comes to doing classy, elegant, low-profile dress watches. So that's it as far as Patek's concerned for me. Ricky, you get anything to add to that, or should we just move on?
Well, I think they're probably going to be charging about 31% more than they did a couple of weeks ago. Even Ben from Norqain was caught in the through fire because he was featured maybe in Watch Pro magazine, or Watch Pro Online. It's not well, it is a magazine, but we don't get it anymore. We're going to have to word with Rob Corder about that. He made some comments about things, various other brands. I think it was the guys at Armin Strom said they would do their best not to increase the price for the customers because nothing is the customer's fault. But we even bumped into Ben at Norqain. It was a chance encounter coming out of the John, funnily enough. We didn't have a meeting with him because the folks at Watches and Wonders this year, they streamlined everything. It was a very concise, action-packed show. Very easy to get into. We mentioned in the previous edition that security, it wasn't lax, but it was easier to get through, get to your first appointment and not miss out on the first 5 to 10 minutes of things going ahead. But we had our time reduced, I suppose you could say. A lot of journalists were actually uninvited or weren't given the green light to come across. But in the end, we actually increased the amount of time that were there because of the things we were doing for the brands that were there, the shows we were recording, the live productions that we were doing for people. So it all became right on the night. But we caught up with Ben at Norqain, and we'll talk a little bit about that later on. But the whole feeling about the tariffs, it had a chilling effect on the final day that we were there.
It certainly did. You could tell there was just, maybe tension's the wrong word, but you could feel the air was just a little bit thicker than it had been previously. And it wasn't because they were all smoking indoors. No, just that little bit of apprehension, I guess is maybe a better word of, oh, what does this all mean? How is this going to play out? Is this just a certain moment in time? But it would appear now, a good few days on, that it looks like it's hardcore coming into force. Who knows what the weeks, months and years ahead of us actually have going to be in play, but let's see what happens, and hopefully things settle down and everything goes back to a more normal. Hopefully this is not the new normal.
You say normal, I mean, is it normal to have the most complications jam-packed into a watch and then just casually show off a watch show? That's what Vacheron did this year.
Yeah, I think the word you're looking for is complications, but anyway, I'll just correct your pronunciations on that. But yes, they did reveal, although after they had shown us all of their other releases, what pertains to be, and I believe is, the world's most complicated wristwatch.
Let me set the scene. What happened was, before Watches and Wonders, we always organised to do a live recording with the folks at Vacheron once a year. And this year, because it is their anniversary, 270 years, the promotion they're running is called Quest for Knowledge, Quest for Enlightenment, I suppose. And we didn't have time to organise anything, so something will be coming up. Maybe a few things will be coming up this year with the guys at Vacheron. I was not even sworn to secrecy. They were so selective about who they told that myself and Dave didn't even find out about what was happening. All we were told was, come to the presentation and then hang around. We will grab a hold of you, we will take you to the side, and we will show you something really special. So, as always, myself and Dave, we decided not to look too far into the future. We kind of ignored the emails coming through because, again, we wanted to walk in and be mesmerised with what was on display, what was showcased to us. And the initial watches were fantastic. They had all kinds of stuff. They had the patrimonies, they had the open work, the open heart dials, various different things. Crazy designs on the dial that perhaps you wouldn't really expect from the likes of Vacheron, and then they whisked us off. And instead of just generally showing us what was on display, they had a master watchmaker come out and give us the run through.
The three that caught my eye more than anything were the tradition LA open-faced models. Now, normally not a big guy for open-face watches, but these were absolutely stunning. A tour de force of what Vacheron are the best at, which is doing this open work, fine finishing, haute horology work at prices that are high, but maybe lower than you would be expecting from the very highest end of hand finishing manufacturers. Obviously, this is their 270th year. They have been in constant production since those very early days, and they're one of, if not the oldest brand that is still operating in its original format. So yes, but then we got outside and there was a large cylindrical glass with a watch hanging in it, and only when you get a bit closer to it, you began to think, there's quite a lot going on here. A lot more than kind of meets the eye. 41 different complications all packed into a wristwatch. And yes, you're probably thinking, to get 41 complications in a wristwatch means it's a mighty big wristwatch. But no, in fact, this is coming in at 45 millimeters by 14.99 millimeters thick. Kind of the same size as one of the chunkier dive watch from, say, someone like Omega, which is not a tiny petite dress watch, but when you've packed 41 complications, including all the obvious things, time telling, moon phase, perpetual calendar, but you've got a whole load of gongs going on in there as well for having, chiming watches. You've got an astronomical complication. You've got a zodiac complication. You had every complication you could probably think of, and a few that you can't even think of at this moment in time, into a beautifully packaged watch that had a weirdly modern vibe to it for what I was concerned. It had a few colours associated to it that you wouldn't maybe normally associate with a Vacheron. It was a thoroughly cool, modern, whilst being very traditional watch, and we were very lucky to have one of their master watchmakers there who did an excellent job of explaining things that neither myself nor Ricky had any idea of what he was talking about, but it made us look intelligent as we stood there nodding a lot along in agreement with everything that he said. Absolutely outstanding. They obviously had done a previous highest number of complications in a watch a few years ago that had been a commission for them, but this was something they had done off of their own backs for their own reasons, and I believe, if I'm right, Ricky, they said it had taken around 8 years of development work to get it to come to fruition.
Correct. 8+ years to bring this to life, and that sounds like a long time. But when we speak to different brands about how long it takes to bring a new edition or a new model, usually it's around about 5 years, 3 to 5 years. So the fact they crammed all this into 8 is insane. I remember the chat with Chris IWC last year, and their crazy million-year complication watch was around about the 5 to 6 mark, and this has even more in it. So commendations all round. And we had a real good chat with Rachel. We didn't have Nikki across this time. She was busy with other things. Obviously, it's a very important year, so she had lots of stuff to do at home base. But with Rachel there, we had a chat, and it was just over a year since she joined the team. We met her last year for the first time across at Geneva, and there was a good synergy between the way that she was explaining coming into the fold and being mesmerised by the fact that there's all this entrenched history, the fabled stories of the Swiss watchmakers who originally were farmers in the winter time. Not much to do, therefore they started creating clocks and watches and movements and making things smaller. And she just fell in love with the story and the idea behind it all, very similar to the way I get into watchmaking and enjoying the hobby to where we are today. Having the master watchmaker there, and he would explain things, point at it on the actual watch itself, which was small, it's a watch, and then he had an iPad and he would just blow up on screen and point at the different things where the diagrams and the renders explained everything further. That's a good opportunity to remind everybody that we've got a thing called show notes. Should have mentioned that at the start. If you click the link in the podcast player, or if you're watching this on YouTube, the link will be in the description. That'll take you to our website. Open it in a different browser tab, and you'll be able to scroll down in chronological order. You'll be able to see all the information that we're talking about, because we've got so much to rattle through. We couldn't even list all the complications that are in this watch. There are just far too many. But it's a big year for Vacheron. We've been working with the guys for maybe half a decade at this point, maybe half a decade, and we've got a lot of things planned with them over the coming months, not just here in Scotland and the UK, but perhaps a little bit further afield. And speaking of further afield, where are we going next?
Well, we're off to Zenith, who had an altogether more blue affair when it came to what they were doing. Another brand, another anniversary. It has to be said, this is definitely a year where anniversaries, they're all talking about anniversaries, some talking about ones coming up, some talking about ones just past, and more talking about ones that are happening in 2025. But yes, with Zenith, it's their 160th anniversary that they're celebrating, and they have released a range of watches. There's 3 within a collection that are most definitely blue. There was no mistaking their blueness, and one that was a little bit more classy, but definitely was blue as well. All about ceramic. Ricky, any thoughts before we delve into what those 3 models were?
My thoughts were, I was a little bit underwhelmed. And I don't like saying that about any brand, particularly Zenith, because back in the beginning, I really dug what they were up to. And I don't know if it's since Julian has moved on to Tag Heuer and now he's at Hublot. I don't know what the thing is, but this year, even last year was a little bit lackluster. We were shown various different watches, and over the preceding 24 months, there or thereabouts, the biggest thing I remember them showing was perhaps a very quick changing date mechanism, a big date on a watch. Then there was a lot of Black Pilot stuff, and then there was the very strange patterns on the Defy range. This time around, blue was the colour. They had 3 that were fairly similar, as in they'd taken the colours and aesthetic, and then there was one that was an outlier. It was almost a callback to the olden days. But the 3 coloured ones, they didn't quite hit the mark, and I don't know why. We did have a chat on the stand. We got to try them on, got to place them on wrist, and it was a blue colour of what you would expect to see of a black Rado, or perhaps watches that were made of a polished carbon or a polished polycarbonate. It didn't quite hit the mark. It underwhelmed me, and I just expected a little bit more. Not to say that over the coming months, as we said before with the likes of Moser, Watches and Wonders isn't the be-all and end-all of the watch industry as it used to be when it was Baselworld, so perhaps throughout this year there will be more releases. I fully assume there will be, because you can't just bring out 3 watches and then an outlier. There's going to be more coming down the line. These ones, they were in blue, they were in ceramic, they just didn't hit the mark for me.
They didn't for me either, I have to say. 3 chronographs. You had 3 models based on existing lineup ranges. You had the Defy Skyline chronograph 160th, you had the Pilot Big Date Flyback chronograph, and you had the Chronomaster Sport 160th anniversary. Some were in a very much a polished blue ceramic. In my opinion, it just didn't look premium. That's my opinion though. Some folk will love it. There were others that had a mix of brushing, some nearly all brushed, some a mix of brushing and polishing that definitely looked a little bit better as far as I was concerned. What I would say is with the Chronomaster, it's definitely no longer like the Zetona, the steel version that many of you be familiar with. This one definitely looked like something different, lent into maybe one of their sibling brands within that group, maybe looked a little bit more like that. What was quite interesting was they have brought out a very special piece though. and it wasn't underwhelming. It was slightly overwhelming when we got to the price part of it, but this was the new JFG, the initials leading into the founder of Zenith, the brand, recreating a piece from their days when they were competing within the observatory trials, winning lots of awards at those stages in time as well, but they've recreated that movement. It is a beautiful watch rendered in platinum. Oh, maybe a little bit too blue. 3 blues going on. You had a circumference ring in blue, you had the centre dial ring, and you had the sub-seconds in a different material blue as well, which I believe is mother of pearl. Maybe a little bit too many different blues going on in this, but none the same, was quite a classy looking watch, although coming in at just under 50,000 Swiss francs on a leather strap. If you wanted it on a platinum bracelet, which was available, quote, to special order, it more than doubled the price, which did put somewhat a bit of a wince on many people's faces when this was revealed. Have to say, do you know what? Maybe not been the strongest year for them. A bit too blue in my opinion. I think they've lent far too heavily into the make everything blue, then reinforce it with a bit more blue. But hey, you can't always have a winning year.
And this is not the end of their year, so I'm pretty sure we'll consistently see releases drip-fed throughout. And we're not taking pot shots at Zenith here because they do great things. I've loved them since day one, from when I first got into watches. I put a deposit down way back for the Zenith Defy Lab, which then became the Inventor. And it was the thing that everybody was screaming about at Baselworld 2019. Ended up at a crazy party, the high frequency party, with Swiss Beats, with Lost Frequencies, with Eva, loads and loads of star-studded people on stage, killing it before the pandemic. Then the pandemic killed everything else. And I don't know, it's lost its luster. I'm just hoping they do bring something out later on, because the stuff they do is great. The Defy 21, the split escapement for a great price, and then the Extreme range that they brought out a number of years ago. Brilliant watches, let's hope they right that wrong. And I was feeling a little bit wrong myself. I buggered off to the hotel, wasn't feeling 100%. I left you to catch up with the rest of the day, and you went off to Hermes.
I did. I jumped off to see the last few appointments of the day because you were feeling a little bit off colour, shall we say. So yes, we went to see Hermes, and Sarah, the Duchess of Watches, decided to join me on that little escapade. Well, what can I say? Last year, they produced the watch of the show, as far as I was concerned, which was the cut, if I remember rightly, around a 36-37mm watch, rendered in stainless steel, which just definitely hit the mark for me. I know it was maybe a little bit small in Ricky's eyes, but for me, it was absolutely perfect. And they were back again, albeit with a version of the cut in rose gold. And it has their Temps Spendu little caliber. Terribly pronounced, I know. Very sorry, all the French people listening to this. But this is the caliber that they have a function on it that allows you to suspend the time. The hands disappear, so to speak, so that you can kind of have a moment without having to trace time. They did a beautiful rose red gold case and bracelet version with a almost burgundy red dial. That blew me away, so much so that it's probably in my top 3 to 5 watches of the show again this year. And they brought out a couple of cheeky little pieces. A piece unique that had a horse on it. It was playing back into the narrative of their silk scarves. That silk scarf having lots of different patterns, but horses in equinary definitely play into the narrative of those scarves. And they had a horse that when you pressed a little button on the side, it stuck its tongue out, and it did raise a few eyebrows and a few chuckles and laughs as well. If I remember rightly though, it was coming in at pretty punchy money. It was also in platinum, if my memory also serves me correctly, coming in around the 80,000 Swiss franc mark. But fun nonetheless.
It's time to talk about our good friends at Czapek, celebrating 10 years since they brought the company back from, well, extinction. They brought it back from non-existence. It's been a hell of a journey. We have been behind the scenes interviewing them, speaking to them, bringing Xavier on since probably 2021, just as the pandemic was starting to turn a corner. We caught with him in Dubai, recorded a collaboration episode with himself and Edward from Moser, and then we've had him on pretty much every single year like clockwork. I paid a visit to their boutique, as you know, just a few weeks back there. He was in family holidays, I believe, so I didn't catch up with him, but I did get myself my first ever Czapek now the watch fast is over. We did a show, we recorded a video, we put it on YouTube because we are back on YouTube. It has been a while. We're now starting to gather everything together, starting to build up the view count again, because obviously when you disappear for about 6 months, it takes a while to get things back in an even keel. But it was great going to the presentation. I turned up late. Dave was obviously a goody two-shoes and had brought an apple with him for the teacher because he was down at the front of the class. I hid up the back, but as Valeria was going through all the new releases, the Pink Promenade, the new crazy bridge tourbillon that they launched, well, Czapek obviously launched on the show with us just before Watches and Wonders, and then everybody in the room were asking the questions that we'd already asked on our show. But Dave, you got to see the thing in real life, you got to chat to the folks. What were your thoughts on it all?
So obviously the Promenade is a piece that has been in the market now for around about a year, maybe just over a year, and has gone down amazingly well. In fact, the first series that they produced sold out, no longer to be had, and that was the water drop style series. And they now have these new ones that have been rooted in fashion, not specifically identifiable as such, but the kind of sweeping pleats of dresses and fashion is the muse of these watches, and they have been extremely well received. And of course, they now have the Antarctique in a tourbillon version, which is something they've been working on for quite some considerable time. They now have their new in-house tourbillon within the Antarctique range, and they've done an excellent job of maintaining the generally very thin profile of the Antarctique, only a fraction thicker, and they've kind of disguised that as well with this sapphire caseback and domed sapphire crystal. That definitely helped to also minimise any additional height that has been added to this watch with, of course, that tourbillon in there. But what you should be doing is checking out the back catalogue and going back to episode 660, which is only a few weeks ago, where you can listen to all about the releases of Czapek from the man himself, Xavier, who goes in depth about everything they're doing, and that was released just before Watches and Wonders started. So do yourself a favour, go back and listen for more information on all those releases properly in depth.
And Xavier, the consummate professional that he is, pulled us to the side at Watches and Wonders and said how upset he was with the show that we recorded, not because we did anything wrong, but because he was under the weather and he felt he didn't present the new release to the best of his abilities. I never even noticed. Dave didn't even notice. Nobody noticed. Everybody commended him and commented on how great a show, because everyone he does with us is fantastic. So even if you've not heard the previous edition from the year before, when we launched Promenade on the podcast, you can go back and have a listen to that. Mizia will put the details in the show notes. So once you finish with this episode, you have a back catalogue to peruse at your leisure. It is always good catching up with Zav. He tells it like it is. He doesn't hide anything. He actually uncovers some of the mistakes that have been made to help other people learn from those mistakes so they don't repeat them. Great guy, and we're going to be doing a lot more with him this year because it is their anniversary. They have a lot more to tell. He's already explained Geneva Watch Days. He's already explained Dubai Watch Week. There will be new releases, so it's not just a one-hit wonder. And another brand that definitely are not a one-hit wonder are IWC, another stalwart of the industry. We were over maybe a year and a half ago checking out not just their museum, not just all their heritage pieces, but their new factory and their new premises, their new headquarters, where we went behind the scenes in every way, shape possible. We got to see design work, we got to see movement technology, we got to see cases being produced, we got to see the raw bars of all the different materials that are used, from titanium to steel to precious metals, and we got to film pretty much everything. That video will be linked in the show notes, and it was just great to go behind the scenes to get the level of detail that we usually don't get from brands. They're very secretive. IWC opened the floodgates and we rushed through. And then we recorded a show last year. It was a little bit tricky because we had very limited time with Chris, but we did manage to capture him for maybe half an hour, and then we added a little bit at the front and the end. Well, we got the opportunity to record again this year. It was fantastic to sit down with him, Andrew, and the full team from not just the UK, but Switzerland as well, and did a lot to talk about. 2 years ago, it was Ingenieur, brought back. They had taken it out of the catalogue, they had worked on it behind the scenes, And it came back. And then at the tail end of last year, they released it in a blue colour because everybody was asking for that. Well, that wasn't the end of the story. They had much more to talk about. Many more sizes available, many more movements inside, many more colourways. And in actual fact, there was an email that ended up in Chris's not junk folder, it was in his inbox, but he saw it and thought it was spam and he ignored it. And that eventually led to a custom colour that ended up in the catalogue.
So yes, they have, as Ricky said, introduced a few new sizes, a few new complications and movements, and case materials as well. For me, the one that blew me away was the introduction of the use of gold, both in the new 35mm size and in the 40mm size. The 40mm having a black dial and the 35mm having an almost tonally perfect gold dial on there as well. The new 35mm size is outstanding. Not a small 35 as many people may be worrying, but with that integrated bracelet, it wore certainly on my wrist absolutely perfectly. To be fair, as did the slightly larger 40mm version as well. They also introduced for the first time a 41mm case, and that's because it is encompassing their perpetual calendar. Obviously, a caliber that they're well known for. Perpetual calendars winning them a GPHG prize last year with the watch that they launched at the 2024 Watches and Wonders series, that being the Eternal Calendar. So yes, lots of watches there within the family of the Ingenieur, and also a full black ceramic variant. And they were very much at pains to point out to us that they spent a huge amount of time making sure that proportionally that watch stayed true and faithful to the Ingenieur range, whether it be the width, the diameter, the lugs, or the thickness of the watch. And for us, to be honest, when we picked it up, felt exactly the same in the wrist as the original steel and titanium releases that came out a couple of years ago. That watch, I think, will do extremely well for them. People do like that black aesthetic in watches. A few brands were starting to play about with that more again this year, but for sure, this Ingenieur in all black was one of the best releases within that general genre for 2025.
The feeling of the ceramic almost emulated to a T steel, titanium, PVD, DLC coated. It had the same effect when you looked closely, the brushing that you would get on metalwork. They had emulated it perfectly. I don't know how they managed that, but it was absolutely spot on. And the benefit with ceramic, as you may already know if you own one, myself and Dave own a number of them, they don't scuff, they don't scratch. The only negatives are they are brittle. So if you do drop it on the ground, on something that is a little bit hard, maybe not a Vicker, but something like that, then you could potentially blow the lugs clean off it. I've not managed to do that yet, touch wood. I have about 3 or 4 ceramic watches now, and I take very good care of them. But yes, something to bear in mind. If you do get one, you have to be extremely careful because they are as fragile as the sapphire glass on the front.
Yeah, just be careful if you decide to drop it in a kitchen that maybe has got a posh floor, like solid slate floors, probably not going to come off very well. But to be fair, if it's on your wrist, every day knocks, bumps, scratches, it will pass them off. Like a Vicker, as we say. And if you wonder why we keep saying Vickers, you probably want to listen to the last episode directly before this, where we got into a bit of a to and fro about Vickers.
It was a religious war, but you're speaking about keep knocks and bumps and scratches and scuffs. There was a Formula One-esque car on the IWC display stand. Got to shout out the guys for, again, doing a fantastic display. Over the years that I've been at SIHH, Baselworld, Watches and Wonders, they've had everything from a polished metallic Spitfire to the containers arranged like Tetris to the crazy 1970s parallel universe for the Ingenieur relaunch to last year where everything was very eternally space driven. This year it was all about Formula One, it was all about Hollywood, and it was all about Brad Pitt.
And of course, this being the movie that's coming up, it's been much hyped for probably well over a year now, but this is the movie that has had the film crew embedded within the Formula One circus, so to speak, for a couple of years. And of course, that big star Brad Pitt playing a leading role within this movie. He was also responsible for the Ingenieur with the green dial. Lots of stories about that. Maybe you need to wait and listen to the episode we recorded with Chris. That'll be coming up within the next few weeks, where you can find out more about how that green dial came to life, about that email that floated about in an inbox because it wasn't maybe initially believed, but more to come on that front. But yes, the stand full of the cars that were emulating Formula One cars. Turned out they were Formula 2 cars dressed up to look like Formula One, but that's because Formula One cars are pretty expensive, as are Formula 2 cars, especially when you need to crash them in the name of filming a high-action movie.
And speaking of fast cars, space-age technologies, carbon fibre, things of that nature, it's time to do the wrist check. Dave likes to come second, so I'm going to go first. And I'm going to talk about a watch that's got a bit of an orange colourway around it. Don't think I'm talking about the one from last week. I'm talking about something that was waiting on my doorstep for my return from Geneva after Watches and Wonders, and it flew all the way across the oceans, all the way across from Zelos headquarters. Elshan and the crew over there doing great things as always at crazy price points. If you cast your mind back a number of years, there was a watch that was a very special edition from Doxa, and it was in forged carbon. It had a nice colourway to it, and it was quite expensive. It went down a storm. They brought out a cheaper version that was catalogued. People loved that as well. It maybe had different colours in it. Well, Zelos have managed to take that case shape, forged carbon material, very similar, and create a watch that came out for under $500 US. Absolutely insane. So I'm wearing that on the wrist today. It's called the GT series because they're known for Swordfish, they're known for the Mako and various other ones in their range. They come, they go, they drop, they get announced, there's waiting lists, then they disappear. Then they end up on eBay for sometimes double the price because they are far too cheap to start with. But I managed to secure one of them. It's not available any longer, so I'm doing them a disservice by even talking about it. I'm going to annoy people, but that is what I'm wearing today. It is the brand new Zelos GT in forged carbon. It's got a Myotta inside, and it's got a power reserve meter on the front. But I usually hate power reserve meters because they sit in this corner, they sit in that corner, they play with the symmetry in a negative way. This one is the complete polar opposite. To give it its full name, it is called the Zelos GT Carbon Supernova. Now there's a name that hasn't been used for a couple of years. Hello, Bremont. And this one has got lots of orange to mix in with the black carbon. A great colour combination. It's also got a bit of Superluminova there. But as we know, with coloured Superluminova, reds and oranges, not quite as punchy as the whites, the creams, or perhaps the blues and the greens. Still shows up at night. And this one does have the power reserve sitting over there, almost just past the 9 o'clock position, around about sort of 9:30. It does not offend. It should, but it does not. And it has got colorations and a bit of a design striping there, maybe like the GT cars from Porsche, or maybe the Ford GT, something like that. Not exactly Gulf colours, but you can see lots of similarities there. And again, for under $500, this is absolutely first class. It has got something quite different on the case back if I remove it from the wrist. And again, check the show notes if you want to see what I'm talking about. Removing this punchy vintage racer, I don't even know how you would describe this leather strap, but removing it, taking the watch, placing it down on the desk to look at the back, you don't have the swordfish. You don't have anything from the ocean on the case back, but you do have the silhouette of a sports car with those sleek lines resembling a cheetah or a fast cat out in the jungle. Absolutely first class. Comes with a really funky watch roll where you can have 3 watches stored within, and the best warranty card on the planet when it comes to watches. It is a super cool laser cut thing that we will pop images in the show notes, and obviously on YouTube you'll be seeing, as Dave likes to say, in front of your very eyes as we speak, exactly what we're talking about. Dave, this is the first time you've had a chance to have a look at this one. Thoughts?
Racy little number. You've got, I think, quilted would be the phrase we'll use for the strap, kind of a quilted 1970s effect, and that's not in a bad way, but you've got this kind of ridges of padded leather interspersed with the orange stitching. Case back looks excellent. I was struggling to decipher what it was until you said sports car, and I immediately saw it. A sports car, almost as if they had cut the wheels off and it just gets the outline of the bonnet, the roof and the tailgate on there as well. Yep, and nice, of course, punches of orange. And being a guy that likes an orange thing or two, yes, can definitely get on board with that.
Run through the spec, it's 40mm, lug to lug 45, thickness just over 10mm without the crystal. Don't know why they do that. 12.5 with the crystal, and the case is forged carbon. Lug width 20mm Miyota 9133 with power reserve display. Water resistance of 100 meters. Wouldn't like to get this wet with the leather strap. But yeah, it is absolutely first class. And thanks to Elshan for sending this over. It's not as if I sent a photo of my new car and they thought, orange. Let's see what we can do for Ricky. But enough of that. Dave, what you got on the wrist today?
I am wearing my Muppets alarm clock because that's actually all I've got to hand today to talk about. Check out the show notes if you want to see a picture of it, or of course, if you're watching on YouTube, no doubt Gav will be editing in a picture of the Muppets at this point in time.
Not to say we are like the two old curmudgeonly guys. It's like the American version of Still Game, Jack and Victor. We caught up with our friends from eBay at least twice a year, maybe 3 times or more. We'll catch up with Keith. He is a resident now over in Switzerland. He is the head of luxury. He's been on the show a number of times talking about developments, not just within watch circles, but collecting in general. It could be sneakers, it could be handbags, it could be jewellery, it could be trading cards, Pokemon cards, anything at all. But it's always good to catch up with him, get the inside scoop on how things are going, and to ask for that hidden data that is GDPR compliant about what the big movers and shakers are within the secondary market, what's selling, what's not selling, what are people trying to shift on, and what can you get the best bargains with. So Keith and the crew there will be back on to tell us more information, as they do after Watches and Wonders every year, because they've given us the inside scoop on Moonswatch Mania, how it affected Omega, how things have worked with various different brands. And this time around, they had Christina across from the States and our good buddy Sophie Rindler, someone that's been involved in Scottish watches since almost day one. Used to run Talker, that has been put on ice for a little bit of time because she's so busy with eBay, but it was just really cool to sit down, have a chat with them over lunch and find out what is happening in the world of pre-owned watches.
We then had to go visit our friends at Armin Strom because we had to go and see a watch that we talked quite extensively about in episode 661. We won't talk too much about it. What we will recommend is you go back and listen to that episode. It's all about the Purple Orbit, the Storm. This is a watch that has been within their range for a few years now, but they have given it a bit of a limited edition makeover in a fairly punchy purple colourway with that on-demand date function on there, and of course everything else that you would expect from Armin Strom, that fine hand finishing, all of that attention to detail when it comes to bringing haute horologie finishing into a watch at a reasonably accessible price point, all things considered.
The guy that was explaining all about the watch was Dutch, and having recently taken the piss out of the Dutch for gold member and various other things, it was cool to listen to him try and pronounce various words that we smirked at, and we shouldn't because we can hardly speak English. We don't speak any other languages at all, but it was quite amusing nonetheless. He was great. He explained how he'd been a watchmaker, how he'd been involved in all the different areas of the watch industry, from sales to marketing to support to watchmaking, and he just rhymed off everything that he did. So kudos to him. He's a better guy than me and Dave combined. Moving on from Armin Strom, we went to see Hublot. Didn't get the chance last year, missed out on the opportunity to see them, but with Julian now at the head, we thought we'd go and pay a visit. Plus, it was celebratory time, it was anniversary time, and we got to see a cased collection that was worth a cool $500,000 to $1 million.
Lots of ceramic materials. Oh, sorry, I was being Dutch there again. No, so yes, we were talking about Hublot anniversaries yet again, because they're talking all about the 20th anniversary of the Big Bang, the watch that's possibly, if not definitely, the most recognisable model within their range. It is in fact 20 years old. It feels like it's been around forever. I can't believe it's actually only 20 years. But they did release 5 models that encompass various features of the last 20 years of the Big Bang. Things like red ceramic, they were the first guys to do it, the use of gold, the use of rubber straps, the use of things that traditionally were never seen as being good natural bedmates when it came to luxury watchmaking. And of course, they were all available individually or as that pretty punchy set that came in a very special, almost science fiction-esque box. Check out the show notes to look at all the different colours and wonderful and weirdnesses that Hublot come in. Almost like they're beginning to become a little bit cool. Shouldn't let a Dutch-Irish guy hear us saying that though, because we will be back on that hit list if we say that too loudly. But that is Hublot. Check out the show notes to see what that is all about.
You mentioned red, and they're the guys that got the red pigment correct when it came to ceramics, put Rolex to shame. And I'd always heard that red dialed watches, red watches in general, didn't really sell. But Tudor want to turn that around.
Yes, they do indeed. So Tudor had a year of refinements of existing lines, but with a couple of little surprises. The Black Bay Tudor 58 is back and it's in red. Not the red you're used to seeing, which was a black dial with a red bezel, but in fact in a full red dial and bezel setup. It looks pretty damn good, I have to say. It kind of works. I wasn't sure whether it would be a little bit too punchy in the face, but in my opinion, they've got the tone of red pretty good on this. Still a few of the flaws that I'll maybe say of Tudor. A little bit high on the sidewall for me, typically in many of their models, but it is a signature of Tudor and many folks seem to love them. They do have the T-Fit clasp on there, which is regarded as one of the best adjustable clasps on the market, and they're now offering a new 5-link bracelet on there as well. Meta certified caliber, obviously as they expand that certification through the Kinesi caliber range, you'll see more and more Tudors becoming Meta certified. They also dropped in a new variant of the Black Bay Pro. This is with an opaline silver dial and yellow highlights. Definitely leaning much more into that Rolex big brother that a few people have accused this watch over the last few years of resembling quite a lot. Pelagos Ultra, that's a watch that got my whistle whistling. That is their all titanium, all singing, all dancing big diver. Obviously the Pelagos being in the range for many years. Again, regarded with that T-Fit stretchable adjustable bracelet being the star of the show in that watch. 500 meter water resistance. They've now got an even punchier 1000 meter variant as well. Little hints of turquoise. Finally, someone got it in there so that I could use that word in a recording about watches and wonders. I thoroughly liked that variant, both on the rubber strap and on the titanium bracelet. They also, though, dropped something that a few folk weren't expecting. A larger watch. They've got the Black Bay 68, which has gone and got bigger, 43 millimeters, definitely leaning into the larger side of things. Don't think anyone really saw that one coming because everyone's been trending towards smaller watches. And finally, they might have hit the proportions for me. Yes, 43 is a big watch, but this one is no taller than its little baby brother at 41 millimeters. So proportionally, this one just kind of works, albeit it's definitely a big watch. So yes, lots of cool things coming from them. And I think one of the first watches that's pushing into the plus €5,000 category, that being that Ultra Pelagos, but still generally operating significantly below the entry point to Rolex. So very much doing what they're designed to do, being the younger sibling to the big brother.
And they put a little bit of lume on the back adjuster of the bracelet, which Dave really, really liked. That's the only thing I remember from Tudor, because it was all kind of the same apart from that red dial. And I wasn't even that impressed with the red dial. I didn't think it worked very well. And it might have been the lighting in the room, because every year, Sarah wanted to come to the presentation for Tudor, thinking it was going to be the greatest thing on the planet. And to be fair, it's rinse repeat from the past 3+ years. You walk in, they play a video on a big kind of arched wall, and then they roll out the releases with the shittiest lights ever. They do have an area to the side where you can go in and do some wrist shots and things, but it's just a little bit lackluster. So fingers crossed they improve things a little bit, because everybody else this year really brought their A game. Tudor rested on the laurels a little bit, although the releases were quite cool. Somebody that didn't rest on the laurels were the guys at Bulgari. They were there for the first time, Watches and Wonders 2025, and they decided to make things thin again. Plus, they took the Serpenti, which everybody knows, lots of people love, and your man, Fabrizio, decided to bring it bang up to date in a way that only he can with his sci-fi visions.
What did they do? They brought out the world's thinnest tourbillon watch at 1.85 millimeters thin. Can't even use the word thick with this. That is the all-in watch. They, of course, over the years have had 60 international awards, 10 world records. They are known for doing thin watches, and this is thin as thin can come. We didn't get to get a hands-on with it because, to be honest, at the verging on 750,000, it was pretty punchy money, and they didn't want muckle-handed Scotsmen handling the watch. But we did get to see lots of the detail about it. We did get to handle Serpantes.
The what's?
Serpante.
Did you say Serpantes again?
Serpantes again, yes. Anyway, they've simplified things. They've got a very clean-looking one that's much less bejeweled maybe than some of the previous editions. But of course, they had those crazy, fully bejeweled ones out there as well. Yes, Bulgari doing what Bulgari do best, all singing Bobby Dazzler diamond snake watches, or very, very thin, very cool, high-end watchmaking. So that was Bulgari.
And that leads us into the final day where we had 3 recordings, including one live webinar where we had to be really careful not to say anything untoward because we couldn't go back and edit it later. But we also stumbled into Bremont. We were walking past, they were in the same area as they were last year, different display, far nicer, more cool things to look at, including a lot of aviation-inspired props. They had an ejector seat you could sit in and take photos. They had a full fuselage, a nose cone of an airplane that you could get pictures beside. And then they had the new releases. We spotted Sarah, who is our contact there, and she caught her eye and we wandered over because it's been a weird year with Bremont, ourselves, and pretty much everybody else in the industry and the collector scene. And we had a bit of a heart-to-heart. We explained our position on things, what we've spoken about over the past year, and she was in complete agreement. She said that, what we said was truthful, it was honest, it was on the money, but unfortunately, with the amount of people that were giving Bremont such a hard time, especially with the relaunch, the branding, the logo, the new releases, pushing the older ones to the side, we get a little bit caught up and get tarred with the same brush as a lot of other people. So we put that right. We buried the hatchet, not in each other's skulls, and we had a good chat. Davide came across. He sat down. We had a good chat with him. And then we got to see the new watches. And I said something to her that she said only one other person had thought of. And it was untrue, but they thought of it too. And I said, it's almost as if last year you decided to shit the bed, absolutely decimate everything so that you could come back a year later, show some amazing things, and have such a standout year. And a little bit like New Coke, where Coca-Cola were doing well, and then they brought out this new thing that they thought would be better. There is talk that it was done to cause a scene, where they brought out something that was really, really shit. Everybody moaned and complained about it. Then they brought back something else and everyone was oohing and eyeing about it. Who knows if that's the truth with Coca-Cola? Who knows if that's the truth with Bremont? All I know is the watches they put in front of me, and I erased the last year from my memory banks as I looked at it. I didn't become jaded with the past. I just looked at the new releases and thought, they're actually really nice.
With the big news being that, of course, the MB2, the Martin Baker watch, one of the most iconic watches within the Bremont range over the last number of years, is back, and it still absolutely holds true the essence of that watch. Has it changed? Sure. Is the case a little simpler than it was previously? Yes. But does it absolutely still look like what you would be expecting from a Martin Baker watch from Bremont? It absolutely does as well. They also chucked in a little bit of a sidebar with a jumping hour watch. Not just one, but two. One, definitely more in the traditional style of a watch case. The other, something that no one was expecting from Bremont. And I have to say, I thought this was pretty cool. Kind of want one. It's limited edition. They're likely to disappear very quickly, and they've done it in a very nice bronze material. And before you all panic thinking, oh, that'll go green, no, it's not, because they've chosen an alloy that will patina very slowly. In fact, it won't give you any of the traditional issues that one might get from a bronze watch. Very cool looking it was too. And all of them, of course, at those new, slightly more attainable price points that Bremont have been aiming at over the last couple of years.
Check the show notes for pictures. There were too many watches to even go through just now. We're at the end of this show almost, but that was a nice feeling to see some good watches, and it was touch and go. If people weren't happy over the past year, Bremont might not have turned up. And then there was news that Bill Ackman has now taken over as chairman, replacing Rupert, or whoever was in the interim period. I don't know if Rupert had been replaced. So things are on the up and up. Chatting with Davide, it was nice to kind of settle things, clear the air a little bit, because for the last year it's been very tetchy. There's been static in the air for no real good reason, because we never did anything wrong. We tried to defend a position and explain things in a slightly different way. But from there, we met up with tons of people across the entirety of Watches and Wonders. My memory is so crap that I took notes of some of the names of people. I'm going to miss out a whole load, but quickly diving through my phone, we had Erwan, spelled Erwann. We had Tien, spelled Tien. Yeah, everyone's got a really crazy name. His Instagram handle is Telling the Time. And we also bumped into Alistair at the Time to Watches event round the corner from Pal Expo. There were various other people. I didn't catch their names. I didn't write down their names, but it was phenomenal just to catch up with listeners to the show, people that follow us on Instagram, and folks that actually watch us on YouTube.
Great for folk to come up, introduce themselves, say hello. We've always said, if you see us, don't be shy, come and see us. We are just normal human beings, and it's always great to have a chat with like-minded individuals. So yes, they got their brave pants on and they came up and said hello to us. So they got their names mentioned. Well, the ones that we remembered to write their names down. We will try harder, we promise, in the future. We've got lots of stuff coming up. We also had the recording with Lucy Nardan, or UN as I'll call it, so that I get the pronunciation right. Of course, we talked earlier about IWC. That will be coming soon. And we rounded out the event, the show, all of our time in Geneva with the live cast with the guys from Mont Blanc, who very kindly asked us back after a year last year where we thought we might never get invited again. But no, they seemed to enjoy it and they invited us back. So myself, Ricky, and the team at Mont Blanc decided with Simon to put out to air the live cast to all of their VVIPs and the retailers that couldn't make it over to Switzerland to talk about the new releases from both Mont Blanc and Minerva, and a good fun time we had.
We will not spoil it because, again, we recorded it and we will have the audio, the images, the little box of tricks that Simon uses with multiple lighting, including ultraviolet, spotlights, and full coverage. That will be getting put together over the coming weeks, and we'll get that out as quickly as we possibly can. Simon only had one negative thing to say about the last time, or our coverage the last time, where I said he almost sounded like a robot. That was not a derogatory term. What I actually meant and what I explained to him was he was like a Terminator. He had a mission and he completed it to the best of his abilities, flawlessly. This time around, he remembered there were two people perched on his shoulder. The devil on one side, me, Dave, the angel on the other side, and it was just phenomenal. I couldn't even get a word in edgeways. I had all the questions I wanted to ask, but as he went through the repertoire of information and the new releases, he answered them before I had a chance. So all I could do was throw in some jokes about Dave and removing the oxygen from his lungs, and the fact that the three of us sitting there looked like the 3 stages of going to Turkey for a hair transplant.
And I was a successful transplant, unlike the other two. But yes, we are going to have 2 other people that were at the show, Barbara and Sarah, on the show coming up very soon to give their thoughts. We might also be able to divulge what we felt were the best watches of the event in our humble opinions. But tune in probably next week to hear the thoughts of both Barbara and Sarah, what they thought, what they saw, because they also saw things that we didn't. Too many things to see within too short a period of time. So we had our Santa's little helpers out there doing their thing as well. They will fill us in and everything that they thought was cool, hip, and better. Probably do it better than us, in fact.
They will. So that is the end of this show. That's the end of myself and Dave recollecting what happened at Watches and Wonders 2025. We could easily stretch this out for another couple of shows, talking about other releases we saw and some of the stuff that we didn't see, because it's impossible to get around all the booths, all the watches, and then bring that back to you. So what we will say is we will be drip feeding different releases into forthcoming episodes. So you might as well subscribe. You might as well follow us on Instagram at Scottish Watches. You might as well drop us an email, never DM us, info@scottishwatches.co.uk, and subscribe to us on YouTube. It's free of charge and you get to see the video content. Now we've got the studios built back up. Dave is not in his at the moment, he's over in Switzerland, but mine is slowly starting to take shape again, and Gav is doing a great job editing stuff, even though he did call us halfway through this recording and took me off my stride somewhat. But that is it. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. We'll catch you again soon.